This is a hip quiver. It is designed to put arrows into your hand faster than your opponent can react. It holds about 18 arrows and sits at an angle for fast, natural access. Designs like this have been around for roughly 1,000 years. And today, I'm going to show you why they still work. I will be showing you how to construct one of these from scratch, as well as talking a little bit about the history behind this technology. We can see this style of hip quiver show up in the Bayeux Tapestry, dating back to 1077 AD. There is a little debate here. These quivers may have been made of canvas, or may have even originated from Western Europe, which would make sense, because the Bayeux Tapestry depicts the Norman conquest of England. However, the specific quiver we're making today is based on the quivers that we'd see the Janissaries of the Ottoman Empire using. The Janissaries were elite Ottoman infantry units that often acted as mercenaries. We can see references to this military group in popular media as well, such as the Cumans in the Kingdom Come Deliverance series, which are likely based on Janissaries. Of course, some of these quivers have even survived to modern times and can be viewed in museums around the world, even if they are a little worse for wear. While the exact design varies, the concept is well documented across centuries. Here's a quick overview of everything you're going to need. However, do not rush to buy materials. At the bare minimum, you will want to build the pattern that is required for this quiver before you buy anything. Your core materials are going to include 9 to 10 ounce leather, preferably veg tan, but you can get away with other kinds of finishes. You're going to want thread. I recommend a polyester because it's very affordable. However, there are a lot of other great threads out there. You'll need a roll of heavy paper for patterning, or if you're on a budget, old wrapping paper seems to do the trick just fine. And burnishing cream, such as Tokonol. Optionally, you may want to decorate your leather using leather dyes and leather paints. Some double-sided tape can also help you keep your work quite clean as well. As for the core tools that you're going to need no matter what, you need something to cut the leather with, such as a trenchet, a safety razor, or leather shears. You're going to need at least 2 leather needles, a stitching awl or a pricking iron, an edge beveler, 220 grit sandpaper, and a burnishing tool known as a slicker. Optionally, you can also clean up your work a lot by using a leather groover, a lighter, you're going to want wool daubs if you're using dyes, and you're going to want paint brushes if you plan on painting a pattern onto your quiver. Everything starts with making your pattern. And while it may look quite intimidating, making the pattern is actually one of the most fun parts of the quiver making process. Start by taking a large section of paper, at least 30 inches by 30 inches. Then go ahead and fold that in half. From here, we're going to draw half of the quiver shape along the fold, cut it out, and then unfold it so we get this symmetrical pattern. The exact shape of the body of the quiver can be whatever you like, but there are a couple measurements that need to be very precise. The entire quiver needs to be at least 20 inches in length from top to bottom. At the bottom of the quiver, you need it to be at least 4 inches wide, and then near the mouth of the quiver, you need it to be at least 8 inches wide. You also need to add this lipped shape that can hold the arrows in place. Once you design and cut out your pattern, you can test it by taping the pattern together. If it is both big enough to hold arrows and a shape you like, you are good to move on. If not, give it another try until you're happy with it. Personally, it took me 4 tries to come up with this shape that I like, which as you can see is not the shape I'm going to be using since I just created a pattern. But it's okay to go through 2 or 3 iterations until you find something that you like. Included in your pattern, you're also going to need to pattern out a strap. It should be about 1 inch wide and about 6 inches long. It's okay to go a little bit longer. It's not okay to go too much shorter, or you won't have enough material to fold over and make this strap, which will later attach to your hip. Once you're happy with your pattern, trace it onto the suede side of your leather. That's the inside that feels furry, not the outside that feels nice and smooth. You can do this using a pen, a Sharpie, a needle, the tears of your enemies, or even just scratch it out using your fingernail. As I mentioned earlier, you want to wait to buy your leather materials, and really all of your materials, until after you've crafted your pattern. The reason for it is now that I have my pattern, I can lay it directly out onto my leather to make sure that my leather is big enough, and then I can get positioning to make my quiver that I'm happy with. This is really helpful because you'll be able to ensure that you buy enough leather without accidentally buying so much leather that you have excessive leather scrap like I do. I recommend using 9 to 10 ounce veg tan leather because it's easy to work with, it burnishes well, it's durable, and it shares a lot of similarities with historically used bark tan leathers. I've also made this same project from chrome tan and stone oiled leather, but it does add a layer of complexity when it comes to actually finishing the project. Once the pattern has been traced onto the leather, your next step is to cut out the pattern. Historically, this would have been done with a trenchet, which is modernly known as a half moon knife. However, leather shears, craft scissors, or even just a safety razor will get you there. Working with leather, we run into a kind of strange issue that we don't run into with other kinds of crafts, which is that we have to complete our finishing work before we do all of our assembly. In order, we need to bevel the edges of the leather with an edge beveler. We need to sand down the leather's edges with at least 220 grit sandpaper. We need to dye the leather, burnish the edges using that toconal in the leather slicker we talked about earlier, and finally, we paint. When we look at our historical reference for this project, we can see that the Janissaries had these absolutely beautifully painted and decorated quivers. It was something that they took a lot of pride in and something they put a lot of effort into creating. To respect the history behind this project, I will be dyeing and painting a simple design on this. However, I will give you fair warning, I'm not a great painter, so please don't judge this too harshly. When it comes to modern dyes, EcoFlow water-based dye is both awesome and affordable. Historical dyes, however, were made by distilling various plants or animal parts in various liquids. Some of the most luxurious colors had strange methods of creation, like Tyrian purple, which came from urinating on processed snails and letting it ferment for a few weeks. The black I'm using here would have historically been made of alder bark and vitriol, creating a pigment known as burgundy black. You can just rub it in the leather with a wool daub until you're happy with how everything looks. The burnishing process comes next, which involves applying some burnishing cream to the edge of your leather and then rubbing it in with your leather slicker tool using heavy-handed pressure. Burnishing was historically completed using beeswax, or in some cases you could even do this with just water. The main goal of burnishing, though, was to flatten the fibers on the edge of the leather to prevent future damage. It also creates this gorgeous shine when done correctly. As mentioned, I will be burnishing my project using toconal. It's a mixture of wax and oil that's very similar to the historically used mixtures of beeswax and oil that people use to finish their leather projects. Once your burnishing is complete, you can paint your project. There's no shortage of amazing leather paints you can use, but I'll be using these Angelus paints. Much like dyes, paints were used by mixing pigments made from animals and different plants, and then they would be mixed with some kind of binder. Historically, it was quite common to use egg yolk, although in modern times, we tend to use acrylic. I'll be using that Tyrian purple color that I mentioned earlier, as well as a nice red, similar to the red ochre paints of the past. And of course, while you're doing all of this, don't forget to do everything to the belt strap as well. Now, at this point, you might find yourself unsure of how you want to paint your project, and you don't have to paint it just yet. You can delay that until after the assembly. This can be helpful if you're confused about exactly which part of your quiver will be visible when you're wearing it. My design here is designed to show differently for left-handed and right-handed archers, adding a unique but completely useless flair that only I will ever get to enjoy. Whether you're saving painting for later or you've just finished it, it's time to stitch up the main body of the project. Start by folding the quiver's body piece in half and lining up the edges. You can clean up your work a lot by using double-sided tape to hold the leather together and using a leather groover to mark where your stitching holes are supposed to be. Historically, holes like this would have been punched using a stitching awl. I do highly recommend you use a pricking iron for this specific project though. The pricking iron will be more consistent, it is easier to use, and it is much safer to use. The thickness of the leather we're using today can easily break an awl's needle, and getting stabbed by a busted needle sucks. A lot. Once all your holes are punched, it's time to begin stitching. I'll be demonstrating a saddle stitch in this video, but you may also use a lock stitch, or you might even like using leather lacing. The saddle stitch begins with 2 needles and a length of thread about 4 times as long as whatever you are stitching. Thread is cheap, so if you're unsure, I recommend using a little extra. You'll start by threading both needles and feeding about half of the thread through this hole here. Then you'll pull each needle through the next hole, pulling the thread nice and tight. This style of stitching will cause the thread to completely wrap the material between each hole, as though it were saddling the excess material. Be very careful not to twist your thread and to keep everything as straight as possible. I won't lie to you, it's annoying with a project this large, which is why it is very important to take good care not to twist up or accidentally tie up your thread in any kind of way. Once you get to the end, stitch back through 2 or 3 of your holes, tie off the thread, and if you used a polyester like I recommended, You can then take a lighter, light the edge of the polyester on fire, let it burn down, and push the melted plasticky bits into the leather for a nice clean finish. There's no shortage of historical references to this style of stitching, as it's a relatively simple stitch and it is very, very strong and effective. Also, if you want to revisit painting the main body of the quiver, now's a good time to do it because you can visualize what you can and can't see on the quiver, and there's not going to be any more major changes to what the body of the quiver looks like. Now that everything else is stitched up, it is time to attach the belt strap we cut out early on. I like to attach the strap at approximately a 45-degree angle right here. I'll attach this using a saddle stitch just like before, but I'm just gonna eyeball where my pricking iron should punch holes. A rivet's also a good option for attaching the belt strap, but I find they're a pain to set properly. If you're unsure about the positioning of the strap, hold the quiver on your belt line until you're comfortable with where it is, and test everything before attaching. And that's it, we're done. This is a durable design used for centuries that still works today. When you build yours, I highly recommend you focus on making sure it's functional, and you can adjust the design later as you learn what you like and dislike. And when you end up making one of these, make sure you show it off. This is a deeply personal project, and historically the Janissaries that made these took a lot of pride in what they did. So it is historically accurate for you to brag about this, and to take great pride in your work.